The Galactic Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian, its curved walls displaying real-time holographic feeds from 1,000 burning worlds. Ambassador Zephyra of the Altarian Republic watched the feeds with 4 of her 6 eyes, while the remaining 2 tracked the heated debate unfolding before her. The air recyclers worked overtime to process the various atmospheric requirements of the assembled species, creating a symphony of mechanical whispers that have become the soundtrack to their collective despair. Another system has fallen, announced High Chancellor Vortex, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's bioluminescent lighting into prismatic fragments across the assembly floor. The hegemony's war machines have consumed the Kepler 442 system. 7 billion Tessarian lives, extinguished in the span of 3 solar rotations. A collective shudder rippled through the assembled representatives. The war against the Void hegemony had raged for 47 galactic standard years, and in all that time, the Allied forces had achieved nothing more than strategic retreats and Pyrrhic victories. The hegemony's biomechanical constructs seemed limitless, their hunger for conquest matched only by their complete disregard for sentient life. Zephyra's translator implant buzzed as Senator Kralix of the Theran Confederation rose to speak. His serpentine body coiled around the speaking platform as acidic words dripped from his vocal apertures. We cannot continue this futile resistance. The hegemony offers terms. Conditional surrender with guaranteed survival for 15% of each species' population. It is more than we can hope to achieve through continued warfare. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of protests, war cries, and despair songs. Zephyra remained silent, her people's natural stoicism serving her well in this moment of galactic crisis. The Altarians had been among the first to encounter the hegemony's advanced scouts 50 years ago. She remembered her grandmother's stories of those early battles, before anyone understood what they were truly facing. 15%, spat General Thax, commander of the Regelian Defense Corps. His mandibles clicked in disgust as he spoke. 15% survival rate for over 3,000 sentient species across the galaxy. We would be preserving ourselves as curiosities in the hegemony's biological collection. High Chancellor Vortex's form dimmed slightly, a sign of deep contemplation among his people. Yet what alternative do we possess? Our combined fleets number fewer than 12,000 vessels. Intelligence reports suggest the hegemony commands over 200,000 war constructs, with production facilities capable of generating 1,000 new vessels every standard cycle. The mathematics were indeed sobering. Zephyra had run the calculations herself countless times during the sleepless periods between emergency sessions. Even if every Allied vessel achieved a kill ratio of 20-1, they would still face complete annihilation long before making a meaningful impact on hegemony forces. Perhaps, came a trembling voice from the back of the chamber. It is time to consider the forbidden archives. The speaker was Dr. Linus Corwin, chief xenoarchaeologist of the United Research Collective. Her small, gray-skinned frame seemed to shrink even further under the sudden attention of 3,000 pairs of eyes, sensors, and perception organs. The chamber fell into an uncomfortable silence that stretched for nearly a full minute. Chancellor Vortex was the first to break the quiet. Dr. Corwin, surely you cannot be serious. The archives contain nothing but myth and speculation from the galaxy's prehistoric periods. With respect, Chancellor, Corwin replied, her voice gaining strength. The archives contain verified historical records dating back over 50,000 years. Records that speak of species and civilizations that predate our current galactic community by millennia. Senator Kralix's laugh was a harsh, chemical sound. Ancient fairy tales will not save us from extinction, Doctor. The hegemony's weapons are quite real, as are their fleet positions advancing toward our core systems. But Dr. Corwin stood her ground. The archives speak of a species known as humans or humanity. According to the records, they emerged from a small, unremarkable world in what we now call the Outer Spiral Territories. The documentation suggests they possessed certain, unique characteristics. Zephyra found herself leaning forward despite her skepticism. The Outer Spiral Territories had been among the first regions consumed by the hegemony's expansion. No life remained in those sectors except for the biomechanical constructs that now use them as staging areas for further conquest. What manner of characteristics? Asked General Thax, his professional interest apparently overriding his dismissive attitude. Dr. Corwin activated her personal holographic display, and suddenly, the chamber was filled with images and text in dozens of ancient scripts. According to multiple independent sources, humans were extraordinary in their capacity for adaptation, innovation under pressure, and what the records call asymmetrical problem solving. They seemed to thrive in impossible situations. Seemed to, Senator Kralix emphasized. If such a species existed, were they now? Why have we never encountered them in our exploration of the galaxy? The question hung in the air like a noxious gas. Dr. Corwin's display shifted, showing star charts and timeline calculations. The records suggest they disappeared from known space approximately 10,000 years ago. Some accounts speak of a great departure, others of transcendence. A few sources claim they simply chose isolation after growing weary of galactic politics. Convenient, muttered someone from the Andromedan delegation. But Zephyra was studying the data with growing fascination. Her people had always been natural historians, and she recognized the hallmarks of genuine archaeological evidence when she saw it. Dr. Corwin, these records you've presented, they come from multiple civilizations across different time periods? Correct, Ambassador. 17 different species, spanning nearly 30,000 years of galactic history. The Precursor Alliance, the Crystal Dominions, the First Republic, even fragments from the ancient Mechanist Collective, all speak of encounters with humans. Chancellor Vortex's form brightened suddenly. You are proposing that we somehow locate this mythical species and request their assistance? Even assuming they exist, even assuming we could find them, what makes you believe they would involve themselves in our conflict? Dr. Corwin's expression grew solemn. Because according to every historical account I've studied, humans have an almost pathological inability to ignore genocide. The records consistently describe their intervention in conflicts where innocent populations faced extinction, regardless of political considerations or personal cost. The chamber buzzed with translation software, working to process emotional concepts that didn't exist in many of the represented languages. Hope was a dangerous commodity in wartime, and Zephyra could see it spreading through the assembly like a contagion. This is madness, declared Senator Kralix. We are considering abandoning rational strategy to chase after ghost stories from the galactic dawn. What rational strategy? General Thax shot back. Surrender? Extinction? Or perhaps you have a master plan hidden in your poison sacs. Before the exchange could escalate into actual violence, Chancellor Vortex restored order with a pulse of brilliant light from his crystalline matrix. Dr. Corwin, assume for the moment that this species exists and that we could somehow locate them. How would you propose we make contact? The xenoarchaeologist's display shifted again, showing what appeared to be a star map with several systems highlighted in pulsing red markers. The records speak of certain locations that held special significance for humans. Memorial sites, historical battlegrounds, places they designated as sacred. If any trace of them remains in our galaxy, these will be the most likely locations to begin our search. Zephyr studied the map carefully. Several of the highlighted systems were indeed in the outer spiral territories, now deep within hegemony-controlled space. But 3 others lay in the contested border regions, areas where a small, fast ship might be able to penetrate undetected. The nearest site, she said aloud, appears to be the Kepler 186 system. Records show it was the location of an ancient battle where a smaller force held off a much larger aggressor through unconventional tactics. Sounds familiar. Remarque General Tax Draidi. Chancellor Vortex dimmed again as he processed the implications. Dr. Corwin, what you're proposing amounts to dispatching valuable resources on what most would consider a fantasy quest, while our people die in measurable quantities every day. Chancellor, Dr. Corwin replied quietly, in 6 months, our front lines will collapse completely. The hegemony will control 70% of inhabited galactic territory. In 12 months, this chamber will be empty except for whatever biomechanical constructs they choose to place here as a monument to their victory. We have nothing to lose by exploring every possible option. The silence that followed was different from before. This was not the uncomfortable quiet of awkward revelation, but the heavy stillness of desperate consideration. Zephyra watched as representatives from across the galaxy wrestled with the same impossible equation that had tormented them all for months. Finally, Admiral Nexus of the Centaurian fleet spoke. His mechanical voice carried the weight of countless tactical defeats. If we were to attempt such a mission, it would require our fastest reconnaissance vessel and our most experienced crew. Resources we can ill afford to spare. I volunteer to lead the expedition, Dr. Corwin announced, surprising everyone, including herself. General Thax's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Doctor, with all respect to your academic achievements, this would be a military reconnaissance mission through hostile territory. Perhaps someone with actual combat experience would be more appropriate. Perhaps, Zephyra heard herself saying, the mission would benefit from both perspectives. I volunteered to accompany Dr. Corwin, providing both diplomatic credentials and tactical support. The offer surprised even Zephyra herself. The Altarian Republic had maintained strict neutrality in most galactic conflicts for over 2 centuries. But something about the historical records resonated with her on a level she couldn't quite articulate. Her people had stories too, ancient tales of visitors from distant stars who had helped them overcome an extinction-level catastrophe in their species' early history. She had always assumed they were mythology. Chancellor Vortex's form began to pulse in the complex rhythm that indicated intense debate among the various consciousness fragments that comprised his collective mind. The proposal has merit, he admitted finally. A joint mission combining academic expertise and diplomatic authority. If this human species truly exists, proper contact protocols would be essential. Senator Kralix rose again, his coils writhing in agitation. This entire discussion represents the height of desperate foolishness. We are considering sending our most advanced reconnaissance vessel to chase after bedtime stories while the hegemony's fleets advance on our remaining strongholds. Do you have a better suggestion? Admiral Nexus asked pointedly. The Theran senator's silence was answer enough. The debate continued for another 3 hours, but the outcome seemed inevitable once momentum had shifted. Fear was a powerful motivator, but hope, however slim, was proving even stronger. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than Zephyra had expected. 1,847 in favor, 1,132 opposed, with 234 abstentions. As the session concluded and representatives began filing out of the chamber, Dr. Corwin approached Zephyra with obvious nervousness. Ambassador, I want you to know that I appreciate your support, but I feel compelled to mention that the historical records also contain some concerning information about humans. Zephyra's 4 primary eyes focused on the smaller being. What sort of concerning information? Well, Dr. Corwin said hesitantly, while the records consistently describe human intervention in genocidal conflicts, they also suggest that their methods could be quite extreme. Several accounts describe them as having a somewhat flexible relationship with conventional rules of warfare. Flexibility in warfare is often the difference between victory and defeat, Zephyra replied. Are you suggesting they were dishonorable in their conduct? Not dishonorable, Dr. Corwin clarified quickly. More like creative, unpredictable. One account describes them winning a major battle by convincing the enemy that their own supply ships were actually bomb vessels. Another tells of human forces pretending to retreat for several months, allowing the enemy to overextend their lines before launching a coordinated counterattack from positions the enemy thought were abandoned. Zephyra considered this information carefully. In her experience, conventional tactics led to conventional defeats, especially when facing an enemy with overwhelming superiority in numbers and resources. Perhaps unconventional allies were exactly what the galaxy needed. Dr. Corwin, she said finally, when do we depart? The xenoarchaeologist smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. Our ship, the Quantum Aurora, will be ready within 48 hours. I've already begun preparing the cultural databases and translation matrices we'll need for first contact protocols. As they walked toward the chamber's exit together, neither Zephyra nor Dr. Corwin noticed the figure watching them from the shadows of an upper gallery. Admiral Vane of the Hegemony's Intelligence Division had been monitoring Galactic Council sessions for months through carefully placed surveillance devices. The mention of an ancient warrior species had caught his attention immediately. The Hegemony's historical databases contained references to humans as well, though their records painted a somewhat different picture than the ones Dr. Corwin had shared. According to Hegemony archives, humans were among the few species that had ever successfully resisted the Hegemony's early expansion attempts, inflicting severe casualties before mysteriously disappearing from known space. Admiral Vane's biomechanical enhancements processed this new information with cold efficiency. If the humans still existed, if they retained their historical capabilities, they could potentially represent a significant threat to hegemony operations. The logical response was immediate termination of any attempt to contact them. But first, he would need to confirm whether these legendary warriors truly existed. And if they did, the hegemony would need to be prepared for the possibility that their galaxy-spanning conquest might face its first genuine challenge in over 1,000 years. As Admiral Vane activated his personal communication array to relay this intelligence to the hegemony high command, neither he nor anyone else in the galaxy realized they were about to discover just how much the universe could change when humanity decided to come home. The quantum aurora slipped through hyperspace like a ghost, its experimental stealth systems rendering it virtually invisible to conventional sensors. Captain Elena Vasquez had commanded reconnaissance vessels for 15 years, but never one equipped with technology this advanced. The ship's quantum displacement field didn't just hide them from enemy detection. It seemed to bend reality itself around their vessel, creating a pocket of distorted space-time that made tracking their movement nearly impossible. In the ship's research laboratory, Dr. Linus Corwin hunched over a holographic display showing the Kepler 186 system in exquisite detail. The star charts were overlaid with archaeological data from a dozen different civilizations, creating a complex, three-dimensional puzzle that hurt to look at for too long. Ambassador Zephyra observed from nearby, her 4 primary eyes tracking the data streams while her 2 auxiliary organs monitored the ship's security feeds. The battlefield should be somewhere in this region, Dr. Corwin muttered, highlighting a section of space between the system's 3rd and 4th planets. According to the Precursor Alliance records, a human fleet of 17 vessels held this position against over 300 enemy ships for 14 days. Captain Vasquez's voice crackled through the communication system. "Doctor, I'm seeing some unusual readings on long-range sensors. There's definitely something artificial in that region, but the signatures don't match any known technology." Zephyr's auxiliary eyes shifted to focus entirely on the sensor data streaming across her personal display. "The energy patterns are remarkably stable for debris that should be 10,000 years old." "That's assuming the battlefield debris is what we're detecting," Dr. Corwin replied. She adjusted the holographic display to show recent sensor sweeps. "Captain, can you bring us closer while maintaining stealth protocols?" The quantum aurora's movement through hyperspace was seamlessly smooth, a testament to the ship's advanced engineering. As they approached the anomalous readings, however, the ship's artificial intelligence began registering increasingly unusual data. "This is impossible," came Captain Vasquez's voice over the intercom. "I'm reading active energy signatures from multiple sources, but they're unlike anything in our databases. Some of these patterns suggest technology that's simultaneously ancient and incredibly advanced." Through the observation deck's transparent aluminum viewport, Zephyra could see the distorted star field that indicated their imminent exit from hyperspace. The familiar sensation of reality reasserting itself always left her feeling slightly disoriented, but this time the feeling was accompanied by something else. Anticipation mixed with an inexplicable sense of being watched. Normal space snapped into focus around them with the characteristic flash of exotic particles. What they saw defied every expectation they had brought to the mission. The Kepler 186 system wasn't empty. It wasn't even primarily occupied by ancient debris from a historical battle. Instead, their sensors immediately detected a massive structure orbiting the system's star at a distance that should have rendered it uninhabitable. The construction was clearly artificial, clearly ancient, and clearly active. "By the crystal matrices," Dr. Corwin whispered, her academic composure finally cracking. "That's not a space station. It's a habitat ring, a complete orbital ecosystem with a diameter of over 200 million kilometers." Captain Vasquez's voice carried a mix of awe and professional concern. "The energy output from that structure could power half the galactic core. How is something this massive not showing up on any of our stellar surveys?" Zephyra was studying the tactical implications with growing unease. A structure this large would require resources equal to mining several solar systems. The engineering knowledge necessary for such construction far exceeds anything currently available to galactic civilization. The ship's communications array suddenly activated without any input from the crew. Not the harsh electronic tone of an emergency signal, but something closer to music. A complex harmonic pattern that seemed to bypass their translation software entirely, conveying meaning on some deeper level than language. "We are being hailed," Captain Vasquez announced unnecessarily. The communications continued for nearly a minute before fading into silence. Dr. Corwin was frantically checking her cultural databases, while Zephyra attempted to analyze the signal through diplomatic protocols she had learned for first contact situations. "I'm not finding any matches in our xenolinguistic archives," Dr. Corwin reported. But there was something familiar about the mathematical structure underlying the transmission. Before anyone could respond, space around the quantum aurora began to shimmer. Not the harsh distortion of weapons targeting systems, but something gentler. Reality seemed to bend and flow like liquid mercury, and suddenly their vessel was no longer alone. Ships materialized around them, if they could be called ships. The constructions were organic in appearance, but clearly artificial, combining flowing curves with geometric precision in ways that shouldn't have been structurally sound. Each vessel seemed to be grown rather than built, their whole surfaces rippling with patterns of light that suggested living technology. 15 contacts, Captain Vasquez reported, her voice tight with controlled tension. Unknown configuration, unknown weapons capabilities. They appeared without any detectable transition through hyperspace. The lead vessel was approximately the same size as the Quantum Aurora, but where their ship was angular and efficient, this craft flowed like sculpture made from liquid starlight. A communications beam reached out from its forward section, but instead of the usual electronic handshake, it established connection through the same harmonic patterns they had heard earlier. This time, however, the translation was perfect. The voice that came through their speakers was unmistakably human, warm, slightly amused, and speaking in flawless galactic standard. "Quantum Aurora. This is Commander Sarah Chun of the Terran exploration vessel Prometheus. We've been monitoring galactic communication for the past several months and are aware of your current situation. Permission to come aboard for formal contact." The silence on the bridge stretched for nearly 30 seconds. Dr. Corwin was the first to recover her composure. "Commander Chun, this is Dr. Linus Corwin, Chief Xenoarchaeologist for the United Research Collective. Are you human?" The laughter that came through their speakers was genuine and somehow reassuring. "Guilty as charged, Doctor. Though I suspect we've changed quite a bit since our species last had formal contact with galactic civilization. Would you prefer to meet aboard your vessel or ours?" Captain Vasquez finally found her voice. "Commander Chun, with all due respect, we're going to need some verification of your identity and intentions before we can authorize docking or boarding procedures." "Perfectly reasonable, Captain. Stand by for data transmission." The information that flowed into the Quantum Aurora's computers over the next few minutes was staggering in its scope. Historical records dating back 12,000 years, showing the gradual withdrawal of human civilization from galactic affairs. Technological specifications for the organic ships surrounding them, demonstrating engineering principles that made their construction possible. Most importantly, current intelligence on the void hegemony that was more detailed and accurate than anything the Galactic Council possessed. "You've been watching," Zephyra realized. "All this time, you've been monitoring galactic affairs." "We never really left," Commander Chen replied. "We just learned to be very good at not being noticed." The galaxy had a tendency toward political complications that we found exhausting. We decided it was better to observe from the sidelines unless our intervention became absolutely necessary. Dr. Corwin was studying the transmitted data with growing excitement. "Commander, these technical specifications suggest your civilization has made remarkable advances in biotechnology and space-time manipulation. Some of these capabilities seem to border on what we would consider impossible. Evolution doesn't stop just because you move into space, Doctor. We've had 10,000 years to develop without the restrictions imposed by galactic politics or conventional thinking. The results have been interesting." Captain Vasquez was reviewing the hegemony intelligence data with professional fascination. "Commander Chun, this tactical analysis shows hegemony fleet positions that our scouts haven't been able to confirm. How are you gathering this information?" "We have our methods, Captain. What's important is that your mission was compromised before you left Galactic Council space. Hegemony intelligence has been monitoring your communications and knows exactly what you're looking for." The implications hit all three of them simultaneously. Zephyra felt her secondary stomachs clench with the realization that their desperate hope might have been transformed into a trap. Are you saying we've led the enemy directly to you? Not exactly, Ambassador. The hegemony has been looking for us for quite some time. Your mission simply provided them with an excuse to intensify their search efforts, which, as it happens, has given us the opportunity we needed to make formal contact with galactic civilization. The organic ship alongside them began to extend what appeared to be a docking tube, but the structure grew from the vessel's hull like a living tendril, adapting its configuration to match the Quantum Aurora's airlock perfectly. The engineering involved was clearly far beyond conventional technology. Commander, Captain Vasquez said carefully, "Before we proceed with boarding procedures, I need to ask, what are your people's intentions regarding the current galactic crisis?" The pause before Commander Chen replied was longer than her previous responses, suggesting consultation with others not participating in the conversation. When she spoke again, her tone carried a weight that hadn't been present before. "Captain, the hegemony represents something we encountered once before in the early days of our galactic exploration. A form of life that views biological diversity not as something to be preserved, but as raw material to be harvested and repurposed. We made the mistake of trying to negotiate with such entities once. The result was the loss of over 2 billion human lives and the near extinction of 17 species under our protection. Dr. Corwin's historical databases were apparently finding correlations. The Great Silence War? The records speak of a human conflict with entities called the Harvesters approximately 15,000 years ago. The same conflict, different name. We learned something important from that war, Doctor. Some forms of life cannot be reasoned with, cannot be negotiated with, and cannot be allowed to continue existing if other sentient species are to survive. The Void Hegemony represents a resurgence of Harvester ideology under a different name. Zephyra was beginning to understand the full implications of what they had discovered. Commander, are you saying your people are prepared to intervene in the current conflict? Ambassador, I'm saying we've been preparing for this specific conflict for the past 10,000 years. Every technological advancement, every strategic development, every expansion of our capabilities has been focused on ensuring we would be ready when the Harvesters inevitably returned. The docking tube had completed its connection to their airlock, and the Quantum Aurora's sensors confirmed a breathable atmosphere within the flexible corridor. Through the transparent sections, they could see the interior was lined with what appeared to be living tissue, pulsing gently with bioluminescent patterns. That's certainly an intimidating statement, Commander, Captain Vasquez said. But the hegemony commands hundreds of thousands of war vessels. According to our intelligence, they've already consumed over 40% of galactic civilization. What makes you believe that any intervention could be successful at this point? Commander Chin's reply carried a note of what might have been anticipation. Captain, the last time we fought the Harvesters, we were young species with conventional weapons and traditional tactics. We've had 10 millennia to develop new approaches to warfare. The hegemony thinks they're facing the same galaxy they've been conquering for the past 50 years. They have no idea what they're actually about to encounter. Dr. Corwin was practically vibrating with scientific curiosity. Commander, these organic ships, are they alive in the conventional sense? Doctor, that question doesn't really have a meaningful answer in conventional terms. Our ships are partners, not tools. They think, feel, and make independent decisions, but they've chosen to work with us because our goals align. The distinction between biological and mechanical technology becomes irrelevant when you reach a certain level of sophistication. The implications were staggering. If human civilization had developed symbiotic relationships with living spacecraft, what other advances had they achieved during their isolation? Zephyra found herself reconsidering every assumption she had made about the limits of technological development. Commander, she said finally, I think it would be appropriate for us to meet in person. As a representative of the Galactic Council, I'm authorized to negotiate formal agreements for military cooperation. Excellent, Ambassador. Fair warning, though, we've changed quite a bit since our species last participated in galactic politics. Some of our developments might seem unusual by conventional standards. As the 3 expedition members made their way to the airlock, none of them could have predicted just how much the definition of unusual was about to be redefined. The entity they were about to meet had been human once, but 10,000 years of guided evolution had created something that transcended the boundaries between biology, technology, and consciousness itself. The war against the void hegemony was about to take a very unexpected turn. The airlock opened to reveal Commander Sarah Chun, and Dr. Corwin immediately understood why the humans had warned them about changes. Chun appeared human at first glance, but closer examination revealed modifications that went far beyond conventional enhancement technology. Her skin held a subtle luminescent quality that shifted in response to her emotional state, and her eyes contained depths that suggested optical systems far more sophisticated than biological evolution could produce. But it was the presence behind her that truly challenged their expectations. The being introduced as Admiral Marcus Webb bore only superficial resemblance to baseline humanity. His form seemed to flow between solid and energy states, occasionally becoming translucent before reasserting physical density. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that resonated directly in their minds rather than through normal auditory processing. Ambassador Zephyra, Dr. Corwin, Captain Vasquez, Admiral Webb said, his mental voice somehow managing to convey warmth despite its otherworldly nature. Welcome to what might be the most important meeting in galactic history. The interior of the human vessel defied conventional ship design. Instead of corridors and compartments, spaces flowed organically into one another, with walls that appear to be living tissue responding to the occupants' needs. Furniture grew from the floor when required and dissolved back when no longer needed. The very air seemed alive, carrying information through subtle chemical signals that bypassed conscious perception. Dr. Corwin's scientific training finally overcame her amazement. Admiral Webb, Commander Chun, the modifications I'm observing suggest your species has achieved some form of directed evolution. How is this possible? Commander Chun smiled, the expression causing her skin to shift through a spectrum of warm colors. Doctor, imagine if your species had spent 10,000 years working exclusively on one problem: how to become the most effective possible opponents for entities like the void hegemony. Every generation choosing modifications that would make their children better warriors, better strategists, better survivors. But the level of integration between biological and technological systems you're displaying, Dr. Corwin persisted, this represents advances that should take millions of years of natural evolution. Admiral Webb's form solidified completely as he responded. Natural evolution is inefficient and undirected. Once we develop the ability to guide our own development, we could achieve in centuries what random mutation might accomplish in eons. The question wasn't whether such advancement was possible, but whether we could achieve it before the harvesters returned. Zephyra was studying the tactical displays that had materialized on the walls around them. The information being presented showed the current galactic situation in frightening detail. Hegemony fleets were advancing along dozens of fronts simultaneously, consuming entire systems with methodical efficiency. Admiral, she said, the scope of the threat we're facing is larger than our previous intelligence suggested. According to your data, the hegemony commands over 300,000 war vessels, not the 200,000 our scouts estimated. Your scouts are seeing only the active combat units, Ambassador. The hegemony's true strength lies in their production capabilities. They can convert conquered worlds into manufacturing centers within months, turning the resources of their victims against their neighbors. Captain Vasquez was examining technical specifications for hegemony war constructs with growing alarm. These biomechanical designs are remarkably sophisticated. They seem to combine the advantages of living systems with the reliability of artificial constructs. They do, Commander Chin confirmed. But they also represent the harvester's fundamental weakness. Their constructs are extensions of a centralized consciousness, dependent on control signals from command nodes. Disrupt the network, and entire fleets become vulnerable. Dr. Corwin looked up from her examination of the human ship's living walls. Are you suggesting that the hegemony operates as a hive mind? Admiral Webb's form flickered momentarily, a sign of what might have been amusement. Not exactly, Doctor. Think of it more as a military hierarchy taken to an extreme conclusion. Every hegemony unit, from individual soldiers to massive dreadnoughts, receives constant instruction from higher-level command structures. They have no real capacity for independent decision-making. That seems like a significant tactical limitation, Zephyra observed. It is, Commander Chin agreed. But It's also the source of their greatest strength. Perfect coordination across hundreds of thousands of units, no internal conflicts, no hesitation or moral doubts. They fight with the efficiency of a single organism. The implications were sobering. Zephyra had commanded military units during the Altarian border wars, and she knew how much combat effectiveness suffered from communication delays, conflicting orders, and individual initiative at inappropriate moments. An enemy with perfect coordination would be formidable indeed. Admiral, Captain Vasquez said, assuming human forces can exploit this weakness, what kind of assets are we talking about? How many ships can your people commit to this conflict? Admiral Webb's response came with a mixture of pride and carefully controlled anticipation. Captain, human civilization currently operates approximately 50,000 vessels of various classifications. But our approach to warfare has evolved beyond simple numerical comparisons. The number was impressive, but hardly overwhelming compared to hegemony strength. Dr. Corwin was apparently thinking along similar lines. Admiral, even 50,000 ships represents a significant force, but against hegemony numbers. Doctor, Commander Chun interrupted gently. You're thinking in terms of conventional warfare. Ships engaging ships in direct combat. We've developed different methodologies. The displays around them shifted to show three-dimensional tactical simulations. Instead of massive fleet engagements, they depicted smaller human forces using hit-and-run tactics, infiltration missions, and what appeared to be biological warfare on a stellar scale. Each of our vessels, Admiral Webb explained, carries weapons systems capable of targeting hegemony command nodes specifically, disable their control networks, and their numerical superiority becomes meaningless. Zephyra studied the tactical data with growing fascination. You're proposing to fight a war of precision rather than attrition. Precisely, Ambassador. The hegemony expects resistance to follow conventional patterns. They're prepared for direct confrontation, for siege warfare, for the gradual consumption of enemy resources. They are not prepared for opponents who can strike at the fundamental assumptions underlying their entire military doctrine. Dr. Corwin was examining biological warfare scenarios with obvious discomfort. Admiral, some of these tactical options appear to involve deploying organisms designed to consume hegemony biomechanical constructs. Are we talking about unleashing artificial plagues? The question hung in the air for several moments before Admiral Webb responded. Doctor, the entities we're fighting have already demonstrated their willingness to commit genocide on a galactic scale. They show no mercy to civilian populations, no respect for non-combatant status, no restraint in their methods of conquest. Traditional rules of warfare become meaningless when fighting opponents who recognize no limitations. But, Admiral, Zephyra interjected, surely there must be some boundaries we maintain, even in total war. Otherwise, what separates us from the enemy we're fighting? Commander Chen's skin patterns shifted to deeper, more serious colors. Ambassador, that question plagued human philosophy for centuries during our development. We eventually concluded that the distinction lies not in our methods, but in our objectives. The hegemony seeks to exterminate biological diversity and replace it with sterile uniformity. We seek to preserve the right of sentient species to exist and develop according to their own nature. The moral complexity of the situation was staggering. Zephyra had spent her diplomatic career navigating conflicts between species with fundamentally different value systems, but she had never encountered a scenario where the survival of galactic civilization might depend on abandoning conventional ethical constraints. Admiral, she said finally, assuming the Galactic Council accepts the necessity of such extreme measures, how quickly could human forces begin operations against the hegemony? Ambassador, human forces began operations against the hegemony 3 days ago. The silence that followed this revelation was broken only by the gentle sound of the ship's living systems continuing their biological functions. Captain Vasquez was the first to find her voice. Admiral, are you saying that human military forces are already engaged in combat operations without any formal authorization from the Galactic Council? Admiral Webb's form became completely solid, and for a moment he looked entirely human again. Captain, we learned during the First Harvester War that asking permission to defend innocent lives is a luxury that extinction-level threats rarely allow. We initiated preliminary operations to gather intelligence and test hegemony responses to unconventional tactics. Dr. Corwin leaned forward intently. What kind of results have these preliminary operations achieved? Commander Chun activated a holographic display showing recent battle data. We've conducted 17 precision strikes against hegemony command nodes, resulting in the temporary incapacitation of over 2,000 enemy vessels. More importantly, we've confirmed that our tactical assumptions about their command structure are correct. The tactical data was remarkable. Human forces had achieved kill ratios exceeding 100-to-1 while suffering minimal casualties. But Zephyr noticed something troubling in the engagement reports. Commander, these attack patterns show your forces consistently targeting hegemony vessels that had civilian populations aboard. Were there any survivors? The pause before Commander Chen responded was significant. Ambassador, hegemony doctrine involves the immediate conversion of conquered populations into biomechanical components for their war machines. By the time we encountered these vessels, their civilian cargo had already been processed. The euphemism was clear, but the implications were still staggering. Zephyr realized that human forces had been conducting operations that, from their perspective, were mercy killings of populations already doomed to a fate worse than death. Admiral, she said carefully, I need to understand the full scope of what you're proposing. Are you asking the Galactic Council to formally authorize a war of extermination against the Void hegemony? Admiral Webb's response carried the weight of 10,000 years of preparation and moral wrestling. Ambassador, I'm informing you that human civilization has already committed to such a war, with or without galactic authorization. The only question now is whether your people will join us as allies, or simply be protected as we carry out this necessary task. The implications were clear. Humanity had returned to galactic affairs not as petitioners seeking support, but as arbiters prepared to reshape the political landscape according to their own assessment of necessity. The legend of human intervention in galactic crises was about to become reality, whether the galaxy was ready or not. As Admiral Webb's words hung in the air, none of the expedition members realized they were about to witness the opening moves of a conflict that would redefine the very nature of interstellar civilization. The Void hegemony had spent 50 years conquering a galaxy that fought according to traditional rules. They were about to discover what happened when those rules no longer applied. In the depths of space, human vessels were already moving toward targets the hegemony considered secure, carrying weapons that didn't appear in any conventional database. The war for galactic survival was about to begin in earnest, and its outcome would determine whether biological diversity remained a feature of the universe or merely a historical curiosity. The hegemony command nexus hung in the void like a malevolent star, its biomechanical surface pulsing with the rhythms of a trillion interconnected minds. Admiral Vane stood within its central consciousness chamber, his enhanced neural implants processing data streams from across the galaxy. The reports he was receiving challenged everything the hegemony understood about conventional warfare. Analysis complete, announced the collective intelligence that served as his tactical advisor. 17 simultaneous strikes against our command infrastructure. Precision beyond anything previously encountered. Enemy forces utilized unknown technology to penetrate our defensive networks. Admiral Vane's mechanical components clicked as he processed the implications. Casualty reports, primary losses, 2,347 combat units rendered inoperative. Secondary losses, 17 command nodes requiring complete reconstruction. Tertiary losses, disruption to control networks affecting an additional 12,000 units for periods ranging from 6 to 18 hours. The numbers were staggering. In 50 years of galactic conquest, the hegemony had never suffered casualties approaching this magnitude in a single day, much less from an unknown opponent employing unidentified technology. Source identification? Inconclusive. Attack vectors suggest small, highly maneuverable vessels employing stealth capabilities beyond our current sensor parameters. Weapon signatures do not match any known galactic military technology. Admiral Vane accessed the tactical recordings from the attacked command nodes, watching his forces die with mechanical precision. The enemy ships appeared suddenly, struck with surgical accuracy, and vanished before defensive systems could respond. Their weapons seemed to target specific components within hegemony biomechanical constructs, causing cascade failures that left entire vessels dead in space. But what disturbed him most was the tactical sophistication demonstrated by the attacks. The enemy had identified weaknesses in hegemony command structure that the hegemony itself had never recognized as vulnerabilities. They fought as if they possessed detailed knowledge of every aspect of hegemony military doctrine. Probability assessment. Are these attacks connected to the Galactic Council's search for the legendary human species? The pause before the collective intelligence responded was unusual. Such hesitation typically indicated processing of data that challenged established parameters. Analysis suggests strong correlation. Temporal coincidence, tactical sophistication, and unknown technology all align with historical records of human military capabilities. Recommendation: immediate escalation of search protocols for human civilization. Admiral Vane's enhanced visual sensors focused on the galactic display surrounding him. The hegemony controlled over 40% of inhabited space, with expansion continuing along predictable vectors. But now they faced the possibility of an enemy that could strike anywhere, anytime, with weapons they couldn't detect or counter. Initiate Protocol 7, he commanded. All expansion operations are suspended. Fleet concentrations will be reorganized for defensive postures around critical infrastructure. Intelligence assets will be redirected to locate and identify the source of these attacks. The decision represented a fundamental shift in hegemony strategy. For the first time in their recorded history, they were reacting to enemy actions rather than imposing their will through overwhelming force. Meanwhile, aboard the human vessel Prometheus, Admiral Webb was reviewing the results of their initial strikes with quiet satisfaction. The tactical displays showed hegemony forces pulling back from active conquest operations, consolidating around major command centers in defensive formations. 17 successful strikes, reported Commander Chun, her bioluminescent skin patterns showing controlled excitement. All primary objectives achieved with 0 casualties to our forces. Hegemony response patterns indicate successful disruption of their expansion timeline. Dr. Corwin, who had remained aboard the human ship to observe their military capabilities, studied the tactical data with amazement. Admiral, the precision you've achieved seems almost impossible. How are you targeting specific components within enemy vessels from extreme range? Admiral Webb's form shifted slightly, becoming more translucent as he focused on the question. Doctor, traditional warfare relies on external destruction of enemy assets. Our approach involves introducing controlled chaos into their biological and mechanical systems, causing them to destroy themselves from within. The explanation was both fascinating and terrifying. Zephyra watched the tactical recordings showing hegemony vessels simply ceasing to function as some invisible influence caused their integrated systems to turn against themselves. Admiral, she said, the Galactic Council is going to need detailed information about your capabilities before they can make informed decisions about cooperation. What exactly are we looking at in terms of human military technology? Commander Chun gestured to the walls around them, which responded by displaying a comprehensive overview of human technological development. The information was staggering in its scope and implications. Over the past 10,000 years, she explained, human civilization has focused on 3 primary areas of advancement: biological engineering, consciousness manipulation, and what we call reality architecture, the ability to modify fundamental physical laws within limited spatial domains. Captain Vasquez looked up from her examination of the displayed technology with obvious skepticism. Commander, some of these capabilities appear to violate basic physics. How is it possible to modify physical laws? Admiral Webb's response carried the weight of millennia of scientific advancement. Captain, what you call physical laws are actually descriptions of how reality tends to behave under normal circumstances. With sufficient understanding and the right tools, those tendencies can be encouraged in different directions. Dr. Corwin was studying biological warfare specifications with growing comprehension and horror. Admiral, these organisms you've developed, they're designed to specifically target hegemony biomechanical integration systems? Correct, Doctor. Each weapon is essentially a highly specialized life form programmed to recognize and disrupt the artificial neural networks that allow hegemony consciousness to control biological components. The moral implications were staggering. Human forces were deploying living weapons designed to turn their enemies' own bodies against them. Zephyra found herself struggling with the ethical complexity of supporting such tactics, even against an enemy committed to galactic genocide. Admiral, she said carefully, I understand the necessity of extreme measures given the threat we're facing. But I need to ask, do your biological weapons pose any danger to conventional biological life forms? The pause before Admiral Webb responded was longer than usual, suggesting consultation with other aspects of human command structure. Ambassador, our weapons are designed with multiple fail-safe mechanisms to prevent targeting of any life forms other than hegemony constructs. However, the nature of biological warfare makes absolute guarantees impossible. There's always some degree of risk when deploying weapons of this sophistication. The honesty was appreciated, but it didn't make the moral calculus any simpler. Zephyr realized she was being asked to recommend that the Galactic Council support tactics that could potentially threaten all biological life in the galaxy, in order to save that same life from certain extinction at hegemony hands. Commander Chin seemed to recognize her dilemma. Ambassador, I know this situation places you in an impossible position. Perhaps it would help to see the alternative future we're trying to prevent. The walls around them shifted to display recordings from human intelligence operations within hegemony territory. The images showed worlds that had been completely converted to biomechanical manufacturing centers, their populations processed into components for war machines, their ecosystems replaced by sterile production facilities. This is what the hegemony considers successful conquest, Admiral Webb explained. Complete elimination of biological diversity, replacement of natural ecosystems with artificial constructs, conversion of all available organic matter into extensions of their collective consciousness. Dr. Corwin was studying the images with scientific detachment, but Zephyra could see the horror in her expression. Admiral, according to this data, the hegemony has already processed over 40 billion sentient beings and converted them into components for their war machine. 43 billion, Doctor, as of our last intelligence update. The rate is accelerating as they perfect their conversion techniques. The number was beyond comprehension. Zephyra had spent her career dealing with interstellar conflicts, but she had never encountered anything approaching this scale of systematic extermination. Admiral, Captain Vasquez said quietly, I think I speak for all of us when I say that whatever moral reservations we might have about your methods, the alternative is clearly unacceptable. What do you need from the Galactic Council? Admiral Webb's form solidified completely as he responded to what he clearly recognized as a formal offer of cooperation. Captain, what we need most is intelligence cooperation and logistical support. Human forces can handle the direct military confrontation, but we need real-time information about hegemony movements and access to galactic communication networks. And in return? Zephyr asked. In return, Ambassador, we will eliminate the void hegemony as a threat to galactic civilization, completely and permanently. The confidence in Admiral Webb's statement was absolute, but Zephyra found herself wondering what kind of civilization humanity had become during their isolation. The beings in front of her bore little resemblance to the historical records of baseline humans, and their capabilities seemed to approach what less advanced species might consider godlike. Admiral, she said, I have to ask, what do you expect galactic civilization to look like after this war is over? Will human forces simply return to isolation, or are you planning a more permanent involvement in galactic affairs? The question seemed to amuse Commander Chun, her skin patterns shifting to brighter, more cheerful colors. Ambassador, I think you're operating under a misconception about our current relationship with the galaxy. We never really left. We just became very good at being invisible when we chose to be. You've been monitoring galactic affairs all this time? Admiral Webb nodded. For 10,000 years, human civilization has maintained observation posts throughout the galaxy. We've watched civilizations rise and fall, prevented 17 potential extinction events, and quietly guided technological development to ensure biological species remain competitive with artificial constructs. The revelations kept coming, each one more staggering than the last. Humanity hadn't withdrawn from galactic affairs. They had simply moved to a level of operation that made conventional politics irrelevant. Admiral, Dr. Corwin said slowly, are you saying that human civilization has been secretly protecting galactic development for millennia? Not protecting, Doctor. Gardening. Ensuring that biological intelligence continued to evolve and develop rather than stagnating or being replaced by artificial alternatives. Zephyra realized that they were dealing with a civilization that operated on timescales and with capabilities that dwarfed anything the current Galactic Council could comprehend. The humans weren't asking to join their war. They were informing them that the war was already being fought on their behalf. "Admiral," she said finally, "what happens if the Galactic Council refuses to cooperate with your operations?" Admiral Webb's response was delivered with the calm certainty of someone stating an obvious fact. "Ambassador, the void hegemony will still be eliminated. The only variable is whether galactic civilization participates as an ally or is simply protected as we carry out the necessary actions." As the implications of this statement settled over the expedition members, Admiral Vane was receiving reports that would confirm his worst fears. Additional hegemony command nodes were coming under attack across 17 different sectors simultaneously. The unknown enemy wasn't just conducting hit-and-run raids. They were launching a coordinated campaign designed to systematically dismantle hegemony military infrastructure. The galaxy's most feared conquerors were about to discover what it meant to face an opponent that had spent 10,000 years preparing for exactly this confrontation. The Galactic Council chamber had never hosted an emergency session quite like this one. Representatives from 3,000 species sat in stunned silence as Ambassador Zephyra concluded her report on a human contact mission. The holographic displays around the chamber showed real-time updates from across the galaxy, painting a picture of warfare unlike anything in recorded history. High Chancellor Vortex's crystalline form pulsed with complex light patterns as he processed the implications of what they had learned. "Ambassador Zephyra, Dr. Corwin, Captain Vasquez, your report suggests that this human civilization possesses military capabilities that exceed our previous understanding of what is technologically possible." "That is correct, Chancellor," Zephyr replied. "More importantly, they have already begun operations against hegemony forces with remarkable success. In the past 72 hours, human strikes have resulted in the destruction or incapacitation of over 15,000 enemy vessels." The number sent ripples of amazement and disbelief throughout the assembly. Senator Kralix uncoiled from his platform, his serpentine form betraying obvious agitation. 15,000 vessels? "Ambassador, are you asking us to believe that this mysterious species has achieved in 3 days what our combined fleets have failed to accomplish in 50 years? Dr. Corwin stepped forward, activating holographic displays that showed tactical recordings from human operations. "Senator, I realize these reports strain credibility, but the evidence is overwhelming. Human forces are employing weapons and tactics that render conventional military doctrine obsolete. The recordings showed hegemony fleets simply ceasing to function as invisible influences caused their biomechanical systems to turn against themselves. Massive command ships died without any apparent external cause. Their crews converted to basic organic components as artificial neural networks collapsed in cascading failures. General Thax studied the tactical data with professional fascination. Dr. Corwin, these weapon effects appear to target the integration between biological and artificial systems within hegemony constructs. How is such precision possible? General, according to human sources, their weapons are essentially sophisticated life forms designed to recognize and disrupt specific types of artificial consciousness. They're fighting biology with biology, but at a level of sophistication we never imagined possible. The chamber erupted in debate as representatives struggled to comprehend the implications of what they were hearing. Some species celebrated the possibility of victory against the hegemony, while others expressed concern about allying with a civilization whose capabilities bordered on the incomprehensible. Chancellor Vortex restored order with a pulse of brilliant light. "Ambassador Zephyra, what are the terms of the proposed cooperation with human forces?" "Chancellor, the humans are offering intelligence, sharing, and logistical coordination. In exchange, they request access to our communication networks and real-time updates on hegemony movements. They made it clear that their military operations will continue regardless of our decision." Senator Kralix's laugh was harsh and chemical. "So we are being offered the privilege of supporting operations that will proceed without our consent? This hardly seems like cooperation." "Senator," Zephyra replied carefully, "the humans made it clear that they view the hegemony threat as an extinction-level event requiring immediate action. They are proceeding based on their own assessment of necessity, not political authorization." Admiral Nexus of the Centaurian fleet spoke from his mechanical platform. "Ambassador, did the humans provide any timeline for their planned operations?" "Admiral, according to their projections, Complete elimination of hegemony forces will require approximately 6 standard months. The silence that followed this statement was profound. The assembled representatives struggled to process the idea that a threat which had plagued the galaxy for 50 years might be eliminated in half a year. Dr. Corwin activated additional displays showing human technological capabilities. Representatives, I want to emphasize that we are dealing with a civilization that has spent 10,000 years developing specifically to counter threats like the hegemony. Their capabilities represent technological advancement beyond anything in our current experience. General Thax leaned forward intently. Dr. Corwin, what assurances do we have that these human forces will limit their actions to the hegemony threat? A civilization with such capabilities could easily impose their will on the entire galaxy. The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Zephyra had wrestled with the same concern during her time aboard the human vessel. General, the humans claim they have no interest in governing galactic affairs. According to their representatives, they prefer to remain in the background, intervening only when extinction-level threats emerge. Claims, Senator Kralix emphasized. What evidence do we have to support their stated intentions? Dr. Corwin consulted her cultural databases before responding. Senator, according to historical records, human civilization has a consistent pattern of intervention followed by withdrawal. They seem to genuinely prefer isolation to political involvement. But, even as the debate continued in the council chamber, events in space were rapidly outpacing political discussion. Human forces had launched their second wave of operations, targeting hegemony production facilities across 12 sectors simultaneously. Admiral Vane watched from the command nexus as reports of catastrophic failures flooded in from across hegemony territory. Manufacturing centers that had operated flawlessly for decades were experiencing complete system breakdowns as mysterious malfunctions spread through their biological components. Status report, he demanded. Primary manufacturing capacity reduced by 37%. The collective intelligence reported. Secondary facilities experiencing cascade failures at accelerating rates. Enemy forces continue to employ unknown technology targeting our biomechanical integration systems. Admiral Vane's mechanical components processed the tactical implications with cold efficiency. The enemy wasn't just destroying hegemony forces. They were systematically dismantling the infrastructure that made hegemony expansion possible. Analysis. Can our systems adapt to counter these new weapon types? Negative. Enemy weapons appear to exploit fundamental aspects of our consciousness integration protocols. Countermeasures would require complete redesign of our biomechanical architecture. The implications were staggering. The hegemony's greatest strength, the seamless integration of biological and artificial systems, had become their greatest vulnerability against an enemy that understood those systems better than they understood themselves. Recommendation. Immediate evacuation of non-essential personnel to core territories. Consolidation of remaining forces around primary command nodes. For the first time in their existence, the Void Hegemony was conducting a strategic withdrawal. The entities that had conquered half the galaxy in 50 years were retreating before an enemy they couldn't understand, couldn't predict, and couldn't effectively combat. Meanwhile, aboard human vessels throughout the galaxy, the real scope of the campaign was becoming clear. Commander Chin stood in the war room of the Prometheus, watching tactical displays that showed human forces advancing on multiple fronts simultaneously. Phase 2 operations complete, reported her tactical coordinator, a being that existed primarily as patterns of organized energy within the ship's living neural networks. Hegemony manufacturing capacity reduced to 63% of previous levels. Production of new war constructs has effectively ceased. Admiral Webb materialized beside her, his form fluctuating between energy and matter as he processed data streams from across the galaxy. Excellent progress. Initiate Phase 3. Target command infrastructure in the core territories. The orders went out through channels that bypassed conventional space-time limitations, reaching human vessels instantaneously regardless of their position in the galaxy. The coordination was perfect, the timing precise, the execution flawless. Dr. Corwin, who had been granted permission to observe human military operations, watched in amazement as the tactical displays showed the systematic dismantling of an empire that had seemed invincible just days earlier. Admiral, she said quietly, the speed and efficiency of these operations is remarkable. How long have you been planning this specific campaign? Admiral Webb's response carried the weight of millennia of preparation. Doctor, we began developing these tactics the day we first encountered harvester technology 15,000 years ago. Every advancement, every modification, every strategic development has been focused on ensuring we would be ready for their return. The scope of the undertaking was beyond comprehension. An entire civilization had spent 10,000 years preparing for a single conflict, developing capabilities specifically designed to counter one particular type of enemy. Admiral, Dr. Corwin asked, what happens after the hegemony is eliminated? Will human civilization return to isolation? The question seemed to amuse Admiral Webb. Doctor, we were never really isolated. We simply operated on a different level than conventional galactic politics. After this conflict ends, we'll continue doing what we've always done, ensuring that biological intelligence continues to evolve and thrive. As if to emphasize his point, tactical displays showed the latest reports from the war. Hegemony forces were collapsing along every front as human weapons systematically dismantled their command structure. Entire sectors that had been under hegemony control for decades were being liberated in a matter of hours. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, the vote on cooperation with human forces was proceeding despite the rapidly changing military situation. The debate had become largely academic, as events in space were clearly proceeding regardless of political authorization. All in favor of formal cooperation with human forces in operations against the void hegemony. Chancellor Vortex announced. The result was overwhelming. 2,847 in favor, 134 opposed, 67 abstentions. But even as the votes were being tallied, new reports were arriving that made the decision irrelevant. Chancellor, announced Admiral Nexus, I'm receiving reports that hegemony forces are in full retreat from the Outer Rim territories. Human forces appear to have achieved complete tactical superiority in every engagement. The speed of the collapse was unprecedented. The void hegemony, which had seemed unstoppable just a week earlier, was disintegrating under the precision assault of an enemy that had waited 10,000 years for this moment. Zephyra watched the tactical displays with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The immediate threat to galactic civilization was being eliminated with remarkable efficiency, but the implications for the future remained unclear. Humanity had returned to galactic affairs as arbiters rather than participants, possessing capabilities that made conventional politics irrelevant. As the reports continued to arrive, painting a picture of systematic hegemony collapse, one fact became increasingly clear. The galaxy would need to develop an entirely new understanding of its place in the universe. The age of conventional interstellar warfare was ending, replaced by conflict that operated according to rules that most species couldn't even comprehend. 6 months later, High Chancellor Vortex stood before an empty podium in the council chamber, reading the final report on the hegemony war. Complete elimination of void hegemony forces confirmed across all monitored territories. No hegemony vessels remain operational. Biomechanical production facilities have been neutralized through deployment of engineered organisms that selectively consume artificial neural networks. The war was over. The galaxy was safe. And somewhere in the depths of space, human vessels were already moving toward new positions, preparing for threats that conventional civilization wouldn't recognize for centuries. The legend of humanity had become reality, but that reality was far stranger and more powerful than any myth could have conveyed. The universe had been reminded that sometimes the greatest mercy was delivered by those willing to embrace the burden of necessary cruelty. And in the silence between stars, humanity continued its eternal watch, guarding a galaxy that would never fully understand the forces protecting it.